Hey guys, this is Jeremy from 78 Productions. I'm here with Jesse, one of the contributors for 78 Productions. Today we're going to be talking about Android versus Apple. He is pro Android. I am pro something. I don't know which one. But before we get into the discussion, Jesse, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Alrighty, so I'm 22 years old. Grew up here in South Jersey. Basically, all the important things in my life are going on right now. So I got married a couple years ago to my lovely wife Hannah. We just had a baby, literally last Monday. Today is the 1 week anniversary. Her name is Evelyn Ray. Best thing ever. So outside of my family, what we're doing right now is I'm involved in planting a church here in Glassboro, New Jersey. We've got a state university here in town. It's called Rowan University. It's fairly large, so we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of students attending and graduating every year. We also have a very more of a low-income section of Glassboro that we're also trying to reach. So we've got students who could, I don't know, care less, I guess, about anything other than themselves, and then we've got people just trying to make it. So we're in a very strategic location for our region, and so we've kind of planted here. We're getting involved in the community, talking to leaders here. So that's going amazing. I'm also a student. I'm going to be in nursing school. I'm a nursing major, so we got lots of different hats to wear. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. And of course, Android. That's the other half of my life.
Yeah. So what I basically hear is you have nothing going on.
Yeah, no, a bunch of free time, sitting down, reading books, sipping tea,
Well, I appreciate you being on this just for the quick 30 minutes you can spare.
Yeah.
So this conversation about Apple versus Android is nothing new. It's not going to go away anytime soon. But I feel like within the realm of church leaders and church tech people, there's a lot of different discussions going on which one is better. And it's the same conversation happening elsewhere, but we have a different theological worldview. We have different purposes than maybe some other people have on this process of buying tablets and PCs, laptops, and phones, and so really in some ways there's a lot of other versions, Linux, Windows, and stuff like that, but in some regards it comes down to, especially with mobile devices, do you want to do Android or do you want to do Apple? Through our discussions, I know that you fall on the Android side. What are, in your thought, what are the three best options or features about the Android device that you personally love and would say people should really invest in with Android?
So coming from an iPhone, I had an iPhone 3GS, and I feel weird saying that, but I did. So I kind of, it was a while ago, but I kind of have a little bit of experience using iOS. But I think one of the things that I absolutely love about Android is the ability to share anything from any app almost to any app. That's something that I think is fairly unique. I could be reading in any one of my news apps and simply hit the share button, and I can share it out to whatever I want, whether I want to save it later to my Pocket app, or if I want to share it to Google+, or if I want to share it to Hootsuite and broadcast to all of my social networks. I can do that from almost any app, almost with anything. That's one of my absolute favorite things. It's baked right into the operating system. You don't need to download anything. You don't need to have an extra app installed to make it do that. It just does it, and it works. I share tons of content every day from dozens of apps on my phone, and the process is just easy. So that's one of my favorite features. The second thing that I absolutely love about Android is customization. And when I say that, that goes from anything to, wallpapers to being able to reorganize my home screen to be able to choose different icons, widgets, all the way down to choosing different ROMs, which are basically different versions of Android, depending on what you want to run, how fast you want your processor to go. It goes from fonts to all of the deep stuff of Android, and it's amazing. Um, and I say that, and as I'm explaining it to people, a lot of people are like, but I don't really want that. But the good thing is you don't really need it either. So, just because I change my home screen 3 times a day doesn't mean that an average user would or would need to. But the fact that if you want to, you can. Um, so that's one of my favorite things. My wife, one of the, she complains to people about how much I customize my phone. And I find that funny, but I'm also trying to scale that down. So, but just the amount of things that you can do with it in terms of making my phone, um, is very unique to Android. I know with iOS you kind of get what you get. If they change the icons on you once every 6 or 7 years, that's great. But you can't really, if you don't like it, you're kind of stuck with it. Whereas on Android, if you have something and you don't like it, you can change it. If you don't like your keyboard, you can change it. If you don't like the way an icon looks, you can change it. If you don't like the way your icon layout is or your app drawer, you can just change it. I think that's also one of the things that not a lot of people know about Android. For instance, I had recently convinced one of my friends to get a Galaxy S3 coming from an iPhone, and she texted me this flurry of things that, she hates it, she's going to throw it away, it's not even worth returning, stuff like that. And it was a matter of she didn't like the keyboard, and I'm like, honey, listen, you can change it, and that's the good thing about it. You don't need a stock keyboard, and there are way more options and way better options. So she calmed down a little bit. She still has it, and she's enjoying it much more now. But that's the second thing that I really, really enjoy about Android. Um, the last thing that I really enjoy about Android will sound weird, but it's actually Google. Um, Google is kind of like Android and Google go together. So Google's services that I use every day and that millions of people use every day. I mean, if you have a Gmail account, you use a Google service. If you use Google Search, you're using a Google service. If you're on YouTube searching videos, you're using an extension of a Google service. So millions of people are using these services every day, and because Google operates Android, those services are much more fluent, and the experience is much more fluent just using those services on Android than it would be on iOS or Windows Phone or whatever. It's a very close relationship that I personally benefit from, and a lot of other people benefit from too. So things like Google Now that are just absolutely amazing and just work. You can't really get that experience to its fullest on other platforms because of the OS limitations that they have in place.
Yeah.
So Google opens it up and just does it, and if it doesn't work, they kill it, and if it works, they improve it. So that's probably my third favorite thing about Android in general.
Well, and I would say as far as just being able to see from the outside looking in on the process, me being an iPhone user, owning a MacBook, that I love the flexibility. I love the Google Now features. That's probably a whole nother discussion for another time about what privacy issues you should have and be concerned about with Google. But Google Now is Siri times 10. And just the fact that it's predictive with what you do, it's not the features in and of themselves that are great, but the fact that you notice them in the little moments of everything. Whereas Siri, you can do that, but you have to actually be proactive about it. So there's a lot. For me, I see a lot of different features there that I love and envy about Android users, and in some ways, really wish I could just get out of the whole ecosystem. But I don't think that necessarily Android's perfect. Do you have a couple of limitations within the Android entire ecosystem, as well as just what's on the mobile devices that you find limiting, that you think maybe if you're considering going over, that you really should consider when switching?
Well, I mean, as a power user, I don't like any limitation that I would encounter, I can pretty much overcome. But as an average user, like say my parents, for instance, or my brother, um, I think that there are a couple things that get a little bit iffy um, with Android. So one of the things is customization. For instance, Android is the baked OS. However, if you buy a Galaxy S3 or a Galaxy S4 or a Galaxy Note or a Galaxy anything, Samsung skins Android to something that they add features. They add waving your hand. They add an S Pen where you can take notes. They add multi-window features to Android that say you have a Galaxy S4 and you have a Nexus tablet, the experience will be similar because it's Android, but it'll be different because it's Samsung and Google. I know my dad encountered that issue when he got a Nexus tablet, a Nexus 7 last year, and then when he upgraded his phone, he got a Galaxy S3, and it looks different and it feels different. And there are ways that you can make it similar, but I don't think an average user would know that they can do that or how to do that right out of the box. I ended up rooting and ROMing his and putting a stock Android skin on it so that his experience is the same. So while it's great in one hand that you have that option, it's not. I wouldn't say it's for anybody. I would say that most people could do it if they wanted to, but not a lot of people know that they can. So so that it's kind of like its biggest strength and kind of like a weakness. For instance, I have my phone right now is an HTC One, and my tablet is a Nexus 7 2013 edition, and it's just different. So I can see where that can confuse a lot of people, and it makes it a little bit heavier to switch back and forth from a phone and a tablet, whereas in iOS the experience is, I would say, pretty much the same. It's Apple and it's iOS, and so there's going to be a fluidity to switching between devices since it's all the same manufacturer controlling that. So I would say that's one of the limitations. So the other thing I think is one of the limitations of Android is the stereotype that comes with it. I think stereotypes are very limiting, and stereotypes are on everything. So one of the things I think that Google has to overcome with Android, and I think that they're starting to do, is saying Android has come a long way. It started out not so great. It had a rough beginning, but over time, as they've refined the OS, as they've added features that people will use and need, as they've made using Android phones better, you don't have to worry as much about battery life. You don't have to worry as much about lag. You don't have to worry as much about things not working as you did even a year ago to 2 years ago on the Android operating system. Jumping to Android now is much less of a risk than it was 2 or 3 years ago when you didn't know what kind of experience you were going to get. You could have the same exact phone and one would work perfectly fine and the other one would just be like kaput. So I think that that's a hard stereotype for Google to overcome, and I think that that's one of the hindering things of Android right now. But I think that Samsung, with the popularity of their devices, have really helped break down a little bit of that stereotype. And I think the gorgeous design of the HTC One and how well that works, I think people are realizing that Android is in the game, is an option when they're considering an upgrade.
Yeah.
Whereas when I had an iPhone, you would always upgrade to an iPhone. I think now people are having to stop and think, well, do I get an iPhone or do I get a Galaxy? Do I get an iPhone or do I get the HTC One? Like it's a consideration, and even though they may land on upgrading to an iPhone or whatever, just the fact that people are pausing to ask the questions and pausing to see has been encouraging to me, because just of how I feel about Android and how awesome it is, but also a really positive thing for Google in pushing Android forward. So I think the stereotype is one of the major limiting things. I think it's starting to come down a little bit, which is good, but I would say that it's a scary thing considering switching how you use your mobile device. And it can come with a lot of frustration, but I think that Google's working on that, and that it's gotten better over time, but it's still one of the big factors of a user trying to figure out what they want to do.
Sure. And I think as far as a church tech person, especially if a whole church is going to switch to Android, there needs to be some uniformity in how that process is going to go. I love the ability to have those options, but if everybody is not updating like they should, and the iOS or that the operating system of the mobile device falls behind, and there's security risks, and so you make sure everybody's on the same update process, and then you have to figure out how to teach everybody all those different individual tricks. For me, as a tech person, especially if there's a staff of more than 4 or 5 people and they're all on Android using those devices at work, I can see huge frustration in needing to be able to understand and know every little gimmick and feature that they want to use. And you could set policies of, we're not going to teach you how to use it, but then that's not necessarily supporting the church. And so from my standpoint of a church tech person, it can be frustrating and debilitating at times of having all those different options and the different features, and trying to teach people how to use them, and whenever they break or they try to root them, as you say, and do it wrong and everything's gone. And for me, a person that loves to experiment, that's exciting, but from wanting to manage everybody's hardware, that's just freaking me out. Of let's just go Apple, let's have all the same ecosystem, it's just going to work, don't customize, just use it for what's intended to use, and in some ways make my job a little easier while still making your job very successful and safe. So in some ways I can see that as well.
Yeah.
If a church leader is wanting to make the jump into either Apple or Android, and let's assume that their entire ecosystem is neutral, they have Windows everything, there's no Apple bend, there's no Android bend, and we're just going to ignore how tech savvy the person is and maybe assume that they're not high capacity like you are in the Android field. What would you recommend to them to choose Android or Apple, taking into consideration how easy Apple is to use in a lot of different regards, how cheap Android is, the popularity of different phones in the different ecosystems, as well as just the general usability of the devices and the software that is available through the app stores, the Google Play Store. What would you say a person should do, and why do you think they should go that route?
Well, I would definitely encourage Android for a couple different reasons. One is that it plays well with others. For instance, I have friends that are deeply entrenched, should I say, captured in an iOS environment, and it's harder for them to share things with me that they want to share. For instance, like iMessages, oh man, what was the other example that I had? Like, for Apple provides iUsers with a set of tools that aren't compatible with anything outside of the walled garden, so to say. So they make things, and they make things that work well generally, and they make things that look great, but they can't. They're not compatible. You know, if you're considering getting like a Mac laptop, you know you have to deal with all of the issues of, well, are my Word documents compatible? Da 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 da, and that scares people too. I think with Android, it plays well with others. All of Google's services, most of Google's services, are available on iOS as apps or as different things. So you don't have to worry about, well, if I need to send a document from my Android phone, will it work on iOS? The answer would most likely be yes, because Google and Android, they want it to work on iOS. They want iOS users to use their Google Play Music services. They want their iOS users to buy into Google Drive. They want that available to iOS users because Google is more than Android. Google is a service providing company with services that need to be available on iOS. So you don't really have to, like, that's what I've been telling people, like, if you want an iPad, go get an iPad, but if you want the Galaxy S3, get the Galaxy S3. It'll play nice, you know, and you just have to pick what services you want. You can't get iTunes on Android, but you can get Google Play Music on iOS and Android. So while compatibility from iOS to Android is an issue, compatibility from Android to iOS is less of an issue. I don't know if I said that right.
No, I think
But
that's great. And reality is Google makes most of their money through their search, and that's really what they want. And everything that you do on their phone in some way is recorded anonymously. For me, there's not security issues there as long as you are going through the Google Play Store and not some third-party
right.
app vendor. But Apple really is a devices company that wants your experience to be fluid, it wants it to be simple and beautiful and everything like that, but they charge you for it. They expect you to play within their ecosystem, otherwise they're not going to make money. Whereas Google, you can play in as many different playgrounds as you want that plays with them well, and they're willing to just let that go because their end game is not the device, or really even in some ways the software that's on it, but it's the services behind all that. And Apple, as much as they're trying to develop that, they're trying to get into that same field as Google because there's so much flexibility, they can't. And so I think that's a big deal.
Right. A second thing that a second reason why I would recommend Android is the first thing I mentioned in my favorite Android features, and that's the shareability. I know as a church planner, I am consuming resources like nobody's business. I am reading, blogs, articles, watching videos all the time, constantly, about the things that I need to interact with as a church leader, as a student, as a husband, as a father, and being able to share them out from whatever I'm consuming them in to wherever I want them to go is absolutely amazing. I've been, for instance, if I'm browsing on my web browser on my phone, reading an article, and have you ever opened up an article on your phone and started scrolling, and you see the little sidebar, and it's so tiny because the page is so long, and you're like, I'm never going to be able to read this in time? Well, I've just been sharing that out to my Evernote app, and what it does is it copies the link, it copies whatever info I want into that, and it saves it for later. Boom, done. I don't have to worry about scrolling through all the comments or reading this long article on eschatology or whatever it is. Right then and there, I can just share it out and be done with it, and move on with my life.
I feel like
So
that would be
there's
a really great blog article sometime.
yeah. So I mean, that's just amazing. And I know at my previous church, I was working in with the youth, and I know being able to share photos, share all of that stuff from whatever app is key. There are things that you want to share with certain people through certain avenues that Google and Android have just allowed. I can share a photo from my gallery to Instagram, and then share that same photo to Google Plus, to Facebook, to Twitter within one tap. I've downloaded an app called Quick Share, which all I need to do is pull down my notification tray, hit the button, and boom, I've posted to all three, to Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus with just a tap. I mean, it can, the way that Android works is built up so that you can use what you need to use to streamline your process. And I think that as someone who wears so many different hats, that's key for me. I don't need to be wasting time flipping through what app I need to find to do this certain task. It's built in, and the way I use it is in such a streamlined way that I don't need to waste time worrying about, will this work with that? Do I need to share this and then open this app and then share it and then open this app and then share it? I can do it all at once and be done with it and get on to the next thing that I need my attention to be on. So I think as a church planner, as someone who's sat through meetings, is posting things from events live, is doing all that stuff, the process of it is so easy that it's essential for me in my ministry. So the fact that Android plays well with iOS devices, you're not the odd man out if you have an Android device.
Sure.
And the fact that you can share what you need to, when you need to share it, and with whom you need to share it is key for me in my ministry to get done what needs to get done.
Well, and I think that whoever gets the different devices have intentionality behind why you're getting what you're getting. And if it's, I think one big pedestal I stand on with a lot of things that I'm anti-Google or anti-Apple is that it costs too much. You're paying for something that's way overpriced, that you can get with any of the Android devices for much cheaper, and you're spending your money wisely. Now, that being said, what's the longevity of the product? What are the other devices in your ecosystem? I think that's vitally important as well. So really, in whatever you're doing, I think you should take the time to do the research, and this is going to come into our question at the end, but make sure you know why it is that you're using what you're using, and if that requires you to take a couple days of research and to figure it out, do it, because you're going to be setting yourself up for success later whenever you want to do different projects or engage with other people. If you're spending your money well and you can report back to your budget team, your committee, the elders, whoever it is, you can say with confidence that you've done your due diligence and you can justify what you've done in the process of paying for what you have.
Right.
Just to wrap things up, what is one thing online that you are doing that you would love people to go check out that we can put in the show notes?
Just one thing.
Just one. Yep.
I would say that if I'm online, I'm sharing content. On Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus, all of them, Instagram every now and then. I'm deeply invested in social media, and not just to use it to talk about me, but to use it to talk about Jesus and get good resources out there to people that need them. It's an open stage, and I use it as that. So if I'm frustrated, I'll talk about how I'm frustrated. But if I'm encouraged, I'll talk about who's encouraging me. It's a great platform for that, and I would say that that's right now what I'm most deeply invested in and what I would want people to do. Not so that I could have more followers, but so that the good content that I can post will get to people who can use that content and hopefully change lives. I've had a lot of great interactions on my different social media networks. I would say that I'm most invested in Google Plus right now, but I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. A lot of the stuff that I'm posting is cross-posted. A lot of the articles I share to everything. That's probably where I'm going to be camping for quite some time, is on social media. So that's
and now
probably,
you can say you're on YouTube.
Ha! So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Very cool. And I'll also plug some of the stuff that you're doing with 78, that you are going through the entire Android experience, and this will lead into my question of what are some questions that you guys have as viewers on Android. Maybe you are stuck in the Apple system and you want to get out. Maybe you are already in the Android system, but you want to take it to the next level. Especially, I think, Jesse, you have a lot of experience in this. What are some questions you guys have for him on how you can better make use of your Android experience and make the switch over, if that's the case for you guys as well? Jesse, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to a lot of different posts that you have going forward with Android and everything else that you have.
No problem. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.